Hi, it's Sharon. I'm with the Vermont Department of Libraries. I'm the Youth Services Consultant, and it's May, and this is my book review video. I have a big stack of picture books, a lot of nonfiction that looks really good, and then a whole bunch of chapter books. As usual, I'll start with picture books, go nonfiction, then we'll go on into the kind of elementary level, middle grade, and then YA. So let's get started. It seems like the theme for this month is like artistic expression, art, I'm not sure. But we'll start with this one. This is by one of my all-time favorite authors, Peter Reynolds. He just can do no wrong in my eyes. This book, I have to say, though, is probably best as a gift book for an adult. It's got kind of a somber message. So this is a book about a little boy, Raj, who was in one of his other books. And Raj starts playing the piano. And, he plays the piano. There are only two characters in this book, Raj and his father. And so he plays the piano, and he learns to play the piano, and he plays better and better, and his father really enjoys listening to him create this music. And he never took a lesson. And then his father hired him a teacher to learn how to play properly. And this is one of my favorite pages, I have to say. I am not a musician. However, I like the idea that a little kid would think of music notes looking like this, like animals hanging off of the different lines. I just think that's wonderful. So anyway, he keeps playing. He's a good student. He works hard. And he gets better and better until one day the piano just starts to exhaust him. And so he quits. Which, this is where the point where it gets to be maybe a little too realistic to be a children's book. So he covered the keys, and then, he never played again. But then he grew up, and he lives in the city, and his father, he lives in this house without Raj, and he's lonely, and it's quiet, and he doesn't have his son there. And then one day, so Raj, I think, is in college maybe. He's working really hard. But he gets a call from his father, or from someone saying his father's not well. So he says, I'm coming. I will be there. So he goes to his father's bedside, and he asks his father, what can I do for you? And he says, play me a song. And he wants him to play the one without a name, the one that he explored when he was a little boy. So he played the song. And it came from his heart. It's a little sad. You don't really know whether the father lives or not. But this could be a really sweet book to give to somebody. I just think never discount Peter Reynolds. He's got some really, really amazing stuff. But again, it's one of those picture books that you might not want to give to a small child. All right, moving on to happier moments of art. This one is absolutely beautiful. Swatch by Julia Denos, I think her name is. And it's called The Girl Who Loved to Color. And I just think the art is fantastic. It jumps right off the page, which I just think is so important, especially when you're doing story time. I mean, how much would the kids love these pages? It's just alive. So this is a story about a girl who, she considers the colors to be alive. They run wild. And she wants to be the color tamer. She wants to collect all of the colors. And she wants to train them and to capture them and keep them on her desk, basically. And so she's capturing all these colors. And if you look at her little face, there you go, in between gray, she had to find it. So she's on a hunt to find all of these colors. Rumble Tumble Pink and Just Laid Blue, which, that's an unfortunate name, but, it's like an egg. And she kept catching them, and she kept catching them. And this is her room with all of the colors that she has caught. It's pretty impressive. But she's still missing one color, and that color is the yellowest yellow. And so she really wants yellowest yellow. And so she goes and tries to catch it. But yellowest yellow asks, what are you doing? And Swatch, the little girl, it never occurred to her to explain to the colors what she was doing, or to ask them if it was okay, if they wanted to be tamed. And so she asks very politely, would you like to climb into this jar? You could sit on the shelf right next to Blue. You can make green together all day long if you wanted. I'll poke holes in the top and I'll feed you dinner. And Yellow, knowing that this was no way to live, said, no thank you. And Swatch said, okay. I like this idea of, you don't capture things without their permission. And so Yellow kind of became this wild creature, which is slightly scary. And, the little girl gets upset and thinks that Yellow's going to eat her. But really, Yellow wants to take her on an adventure and basically show her how wonderful it is to be wild. And they go up over rooftops, and she calls her colors by name, and they all come, and they all get to be wild together. So basically she lets them go, and they all have this wonderful, colorful adventure. And together they made a masterpiece. So there's actually a lot crammed into this little book. It's not just about coloring, obviously. But I think you could do a lot with this book. I think it's happy. I think it's gorgeous. You could do a really nice story time with this. You could do some fun activities. And it's got those nice bright colors that we love. Kids even from far away could see. I got another one for you. Another artsy book. This one is also gorgeous. It's called Maybe Something Beautiful. And this is based on a true story of a muralist in San Diego. And actually the art is created by one of the muralists, which I just think is amazing. So this is about a community that was dull. Obviously it's dramatized a little bit, but it's dull. And this little girl starts handing out pictures to everyone to try to brighten it up. And, she hands them around to everybody she sees, and she tries to put them on the walls. But it's not enough. And one day, this little girl's name is Mira. One day she saw a man with a pocket full of paintbrushes, and he gazed at the wall, and Mira says, what do you see? And he says, maybe something beautiful. And so she looks at the mirror, at the wall, and this book has a lot of these pages, these up and down pages. And he is a muralist, and he wants to make a mural. And so they start to see this mural together, and they create this wonderful, colorful, crazy piece of city art. And the best part is all the people, and they describe it as, musical, where all of the community come together, even the police. They all join in and they become part of this beautiful mural. And they say teachers and papas jumped in, babies too. Mira and the man handed out brush after brush. Colors spread throughout the streets, so did joy. And so they didn't just color walls, they colored street signs and electrical boxes and walls and benches and all this kind of crazy stuff. And the whole community came together. And here I want to show you in the end, this is the real mural here. Hope you can see it. It's enormous, and it's an enormous piece of street art, and it was created by an entire community. And if you look at this, you can see, there was a muralist, the artist who illustrated this book, helped design it, but the entire community came out to paint, young and old, everybody. And it really boosted the economy of this little village in San Diego, and now it's become a tourist destination. I think this is a really amazing book. It has something kind of whimsically childlike about it. The idea that you could make the world better with a paintbrush is such a wonderful concept, and I think this is really a good one. I recommend it. Plus, you could do so much with it. All right, moving on the art theme, I have another one for you. This is about origami. This book is interesting in that it's about basically mastering something. And it's about this little boy who likes things that are folded, which I'd never really thought about the concept of folded things before, except potato chips. I like potato chips, folded potato chips. He likes folded things like tacos. And he liked maps, and he played the accordion, and he slept in a fold-away bed. But one day, someone came into his classroom and taught them origami. And he becomes enamored. And so he asks her, how do I become good at that? And she says, I can show you the folds, but if you want to be an origami master, you need practice and practice. Well, the problem is that he practiced on everything, including his homework and recipes and his mother's money and anything he could get his hands on. And his family got a little annoyed, to be expected, and because the house is now full of, folding craziness. So he becomes very distraught, and he doesn't know what to do. Now, this is where the story gets off the rails a little bit. He wanders next door to the Mexican restaurant, which, I don't know, a little kid wandering next door by himself, that part is a little troubling to me. But if you suspend your disbelief, and maybe he's a friend of the family, I don't know. He goes next door and befriends this restaurant owner, and he tells him his problem, that he wants to fold things, but he's getting in everyone's way and he doesn't know how to practice. And so the restaurant owner says, why don't you practice with napkins? And so he starts folding napkins. And he makes beautiful sculptures out of napkins, which coincidentally is something I liked to do when I was a kid. And so basically this restaurant owner puts him to work, and he folds these gorgeous napkins, and he learns how to do them. And he practices and practices until one day he can make a crane just like his teacher did. And he considers himself an origami master. And then someone walked in one day asking him, did you make those? And he says, yes. And she says, I want to learn. And he says, I should warn you, it takes a lot of practice. And so there's kind of this little cute conspiracy between him and the restaurant owner and this new student. So anyway, the story is a little loose, but I like the concept. I like the idea. I like the introduction to folding other things besides paper. I think napkin folding is kind of a lost art, and something that your kids might have fun trying. There's also instructions in the back on how to make your own origami ladybug. I know origami is a perennial favorite among public librarians as an activity, and this could be a good addition to your collection. I feel like there's not a ton of stories about that include origami. There's more like the history or instructional guides, but this is just about how you can be inspired. All right, more art. Are you ready? This book, I think, is fascinating. It's called Roy's House, and it's a concept book for young readers, but the art is all by Roy Lichtenstein, who, as you know, is a fantastic pop artist, somebody that the kids won't really know, but who has, influenced modern art tremendously. And I think this is a really unique and brilliant kind of introduction to this art movement. So it's just a concept book. This could easily be a board book. It's like the phone is ringing, company's coming, but all of the art are his original paintings. And so if you look at this, look at that big living room, and something's cooking. So basically this artist combed through his catalog and came up with interesting paintings that could be part of a concept book. And I just think it's amazing because it could be used as a concept book, definitely. But it could also be used for older kids who are learning about artists and who need some exposure to the art. This is an easy way to get into it. So there's, not a lot of story here. Don't need it. It's a concept book. But I think this is brilliantly put together. And I think it's a really good introduction to Lichtenstein. So if you do art units, or if you are an art teacher who needs, some inspiration books, this could be a really good one. All right. I think that's all the art books I have for today. That's enough, right? All right. Let's move on to something adorable. this book is called Worm Loves Worm. Now, this story is about two worms that want to get married, and I love it because worms don't have gender. They don't have, there are no boy girls and girl worms, boy worms and girl worms, and kids know that. And so this is kind of an interesting kind of role-bending story that I think kids will be really open to. And in this day and age of, people, different kinds of couples getting married, this could be a really good story to start a discussion with kids about the roles and what the rules are about getting married and what makes a wedding and why is it important. So these are two worms, they want to get married. And basically each spread is about some challenge that they face. And they're like, okay, can we get married now? And so the first challenge is they need someone to marry them. That's how it's always been done. And so Grasshopper offers to marry them. They say, okay, now can we be married? And then Beetle says, you have to have a best beetle. You have to have a best beetle. That would be me. Okay, can we get married now? Wait, say the bees. You need bride's bees. Can we be the bride's bees, please, please, please? Okay, now can we be married? And then you need to have rings to go on your fingers. But wait, worms don't have fingers. So they put them around their necks or around their waists and belts. Awesome. Now can we get married? So each of the critters has a reason that, they need something else. So they have to have a band, and they have to have someone to dance with. And then they need a tuxedo, and they need a cake. And they need hats, but they don't have heads for hats. What are we going to do? And so Spider says that we're going to attach the hats to their heads and wait, worms only eat dirt, they don't eat cake, but the bees will offer to eat the cake. So there's all these fantastic solutions. So they go through all of it, who's going to wear what. And they ask, which one of you is the bride? How can we be the bride's bees if we don't know who the bride is? And they, in true childlike fashion, say, I'll be the bride. And the other worm says, I'll be the bride too. So what I love is that one worm wears the dress and one worm wears the tail. Oh my gosh, the veil. Spider has to attach them because they don't have heads. And then they say, well, which one of you is the groom? And they both say me. And so one wears the tuxedo and one wears the top hat. Right? And I think the kids will really love this. And then it said, Cricket's, the one who's been harping on them since the beginning, this isn't how it's always been done. And Worm says, then we'll just change how it's done. Yes. And I think this will appeal to your, dressing up boys and girls who, don't particularly care about gender roles and who wears what. And then they get married. So, the issue of gay marriage obviously is something that people are going to bring up when they read this book. There is no discussion about sexuality or even gender identity in this book. They're worms. But it could open a discussion for, who can marry each other. Two girls, two boys, a boy and a girl. And can worms really marry each other? Because that's really the question of the day. So I think this is a book that everybody needs in their collection. All right, moving on. Gator Dad. This is by the author Brian, I think, Lees, who is very famous for his bat books. This book is about a Gator Dad, obviously. I have to say, it's not one of my favorite books ever. However, Brian Lees is one of those authors that everybody knows and they think it's worth taking a look at. It's basically kind of a list of all of the things that this Gator Dad does with his little gatorlings. If something in the fridge goes bad, I'll let you smell it with me. Gross, right? When they run errands and then they wander into the wild. The part that's missing for me is the kind of the rhythm of it. I would think it starts out with, if there's something gone bad in the fridge, I'll let you smell it too, and then we'll run some errands. I'm missing that, and then you'll do something too. Do you know what I mean? I'm missing that. But it is cute. The art is fun. They go to the playground and they do all this wonky stuff. And they're alligators, which is hysterical, right? And they want more, and they want more, and they want more. And they have all these adventures. And then they splash and splash and splash, and then they go home to change. But then they say, maybe we'll tear up the house, which is a little strange to me, but okay. I mean, I don't know. I've never lived with an alligator. And then they play dress up. And then they dance. And then he puts them to bed, which is, it's cute. There's not, there's not a lot, there's not a lot to it. But if you have, if you have a need for books about dads, or just books about, what it's like to spend a day with a dad, a single dad, or whatever, this could be a good one. I'm not sure. Like I said, Brian Lee is, I pull books sometimes just because the author is amazing, and he is amazing. You could probably skip this one unless you have really big Brian Lee's fans, or unless you have a need for more father books in your collection. Now, grandpa books I have a soft spot for. This book I think is really interesting. This is a grandpa book, but it's also about Tai Chi and about yoga, which I know a lot of you guys do in your libraries. So I think this one is worth talking about, and it could be a good introduction to some of these activities. So basically, it's about a little girl who has this grandfather, and she sees her grandfather doing Tai Chi out in the yard, and she asks, "What are you doing?" And he tries to teach her, but of course, she's probably, 4? And so her version of Tai Chi is kind of bouncy. And he tries to correct her a little bit, but, after a while, it's clear she's just not going to be still. And so he says, "You're doing great." And, it's her version of Tai Chi. And I love the descriptions. Mei Mei is a little girl. She's a frisky fall wind tumbling among the leaves, which is true. 4-year-olds are that. And she is a helicopter seed flying down from the maple tree. And she's a rock star playing guitar for the daisies. And she drums the earth. And so she has a ball, and the grandfather's kind of watching her, mystified. And she says, "Now that I'm really good at Tai Chi, it's my turn to teach you something. We learned how to do yoga in school." And he says, "Really? That's hard. I don't know if I can do that." And she says, "Let me try." And so she teaches him. And he struggles with yoga the same way that she struggled with Tai Chi. He's not as flexible as her. And his balance is a little off. It's a problem we all have. And so he tries, to do the different poses, but, they don't all work. And he does his best, and she's very, very excited to share. And they stretch, and they do all this together. And then at the end, there's a little, namaste moment, which I just think is really sweet. How did I do? I just think it's a cute little bonding story. But I think the best part is the end. After this, you could look at these little pose guides for Tai Chi and yoga and talk about them with your kids. And I'm sure they know some of these already. And you could do some little activities if you're doing story time. You can make an entire activity out of it, an entire program. Talking about yoga and Tai Chi, and you can talk about how they're similar, how they're different. You can talk about what is a martial art, what does it mean, what are your preconceptions about it, things like that. Or you can just present it as a grandpa book. That's totally fine too. I like books like this that have a lot of depth, so I like this. I think it's good. All right. That's it with the regular picture books. I have a ton of picture book nonfiction, though, which I think would be interesting. This book here it's called This Is the Earth. It looks all sweet and innocent, but it's really not. It's a pretty hardcore environmentalist book. So it starts out very sweet. This is the earth. Isn't that lovely? It's beautiful. But then a couple of pages in, I was reading this and I was like, what's going on? They start talking about pollution. And they start talking about cities. And this picture right here, which just kind of broke my heart. But, you know, kids need to learn about this stuff. So they talk about landfills and dumping. And, you know, smokestacks. And then this picture here about, you know, the polluted rainforest, which is just heartbreaking. This could be a really good introduction to the environment and pollution, recycling, things like that. It's a story, you know, it is a story, but it's pretty harsh. In the end, though, it talks about, you know, the things that you can do. So here's your school, and it presents the school as a very happy place where recycling's happening, where they're planting and taking care of the earth, which children do, you know, and they point out a lot of the different things you can do. So you could present this as a storybook if you want to, although it is a little grim in the middle. More than that, I think it could be a really good book for a lesson on environment, pollution, things you can do to help the earth. And this could be a good discussion book. Because of that, I think that this could go up probably to 4th grade or so, to really explain the different ways that humans interact with the earth and how we can help heal it. So, it could be good. All right, the next book is a little more lighthearted. It is about the story of the donut. Did you know that the donut was created by a sea captain? I had no idea. Okay, first look at these end pages. So pretty. So this is a story about this man named Hanson Gregory, and he went to sail with a crew of a ship when he was 13. He became captain, and he was a cook in between those years, and he developed these donuts. And basically, so these stories are hilarious. These little pictures are so funny. So there's him working in the kitchens. Which has got to be a rough place to work. And so they have fried cakes most mornings. And, you know, he was trying to perfect these fried cakes, but they were they called them sinkers because they were so heavy and they were often raw in the middle. And so he came up with a brilliant idea of putting a hole in the center. And the rest is history, right? And so the whole story is, you know, about him serving his holy cakes, and you know, how the sailors told stories about where they began, and apparently there was some controversy where someone else tried to take credit for the donut, but you know, the truth prevailed. So that was back in the 1800s. Donuts have been around since then. Kids will be so amused by that, I think. I like the art in this picture. And he was buried in Massachusetts, which isn't that far away. And I like the round pictures. I think it's really fun, especially for a story about donuts. This could be a really, really fun story to introduce to the kids. True stories, I think, are awesome. There's a ton of information in the back. There's an author's note about some of the controversy, who this man was, how much was true, and how the donut became famous. I think this could be a really fun storytime book, but I think it could be even more fun to really talk about, you know, the true story and how he came up with it, and eat some donuts, because what better excuse is there? There you go. Next, Prairie Dog Song. I think this book is gorgeous. This is a poetry book. It's a storybook. It's nonfiction, all wrapped into one. I have to say, I love prairie dogs. My grandfather was obsessed with prairie dogs. I don't know, he was out in the Midwest for like basic training as a soldier, and he saw prairie dogs, and he was fascinated with them for the rest of his life. So I want to show you the artwork in this book. It's absolutely amazing. It's this gorgeous detailed collage art. And this is the story It's a true story of I think it's in, I want to say New Mexico. Oh no, it's it's the plains out in the Midwest, in the grasslands. And what happened was they discovered that prairie dogs were really important to the ecosystem, but that as humans were killing off other species that were part of this food chain, they really affected the prairie dog's existence. And so this is a lot about kind of how we're all connected. You can see each page has a little poetry at the top. Let me look up here, sorry. Right here. And then the stories at the bottom with all the facts. So you could read this story as just a storybook, like poetry, and look at the art. You could read it like a facts book if you wanted to. You could just look at the art if you really wanted to do that. You could do several different things with this. And you could also do a science lesson about this, because it's a lot about how animals are interconnected and how, the simple prairie dog is really important to the ecosystem of the grasslands. And how scientists realize that. And look how cute they are. I know, it's just art, but he's so cute. Alright, and then, at the end, is a prairie dog song, and a free download, and lyrics, and lots of verses. So, if you're doing story time and you need a new song, here you go. There's also a ton of information in the back about prairie dogs. So one of the things I find fascinating about this book, too, is no one talks about prairie dogs. So this could be a really neat introduction to an animal that kids don't normally hear about. There you go. I have reasons for everything. All right, another animal book, Flying Frogs and Walking Fish. This is more of a facts book. Steve Jenkins is a known artist most of you guys are familiar with. And this is a lot about how animals move around. And they have picked out some of the more unusual ones, and I think the kids will love it. So, how about the walking octopus? And then you have a picture of how the octopus moves with just two of his tentacles and walks along the bottom of the sea. And there's the little captions. You don't have to read all of them. You could just read the heading, the walking octopus, and it says, yes, a common octopus has 8 legs, but it often uses just 2 of them to walk on the sea floor. And then there's more information on the bottom if you want it. And so a lot of these spreads are like this, with lots and lots of pictures, and you can go through and talk about how each one of these moves along. So there's all kinds of animals here, obviously. Spiders, lots of spiders, lizards, manta rays, lemurs. Some animals that I think kids, have seen, but maybe don't know how they move around. I have never seen a lemur jump like that. It's amazing. And that picture of the kangaroo was awesome. So there's also the swimming elephant, which, is near and dear to my heart. You could find some videos of real elephants swimming, which is really fun. So there's not a lot of story here. It's just nonfiction kind of information book. And there's lots about how they move. So you could do a simple category kind of sorting activity with young kids about how different animals move. You could talk about, the basics of how animals move. Or you can just look in awe about how cool the different animals are. Okay. The last one is a little more sober. This one is probably more for middle school, but it is in picture book kind of. It looks kind of like a picture book, but it's a heavy picture book, so you won't mistake it for a storybook. This is about the White Rose student resistance movement during Nazi Germany. It's a gorgeous book. It's got a lot of really nice archival photographs in here, a lot of primary source material, and it's about the student movement against Hitler. And I think this could be a really good introduction to the Nazi Party and Hitler Youth and basically World War II for any kid who's interested. The writing, is fairly dense, but I think a middle school student could definitely get through it. There's a lot of information in here. It's broken up into chapters, lots of photos, lots of captions, lots and lots of information. But basically, it's about the student movement. So it comes from a young perspective, which I think will help its appeal, and I think kids will really like it. So if you need more Nazi history books, and I know there are a lot of them coming out right now, this could be a good supplement in your collection. It could also be pleasure reading if you have kids who are interested. I know I loved to read this stuff when I was young. If you have kids who are really interested in it, this could be really good. It reads like a novel, so you might have middle school kids who could get into it. All right, that's all I have for nonfiction. I'm going to move on to chapter books. The first one I have, you ready, is written by Victoria Jamieson, who wrote Roller Girl, which, if you haven't memorized this year's Canfield Fisher list, it's on there. This is called The Great Pet Escape, and it looks hysterically funny. It's probably like grades 1 to 3. It's really, really cute graphic novel in the style of Baby Mouse or Squish, but it's a lot younger, and I think there's a lot of demand for this level book. And it's got a really cute story line, and it's basically about these school class pets who are trying to escape. And the hamster, whose name is George Washington, who goes by GW, is the mastermind. And he is a troublemaker, and he's always trying to create things to help him and his pet friends escape. And so they're trying to escape from the classroom, and it looks just hysterical. It's going to be a series, and I think you could probably need it. It's 63 pages, and it could be like a good introduction for the kids who want to read those older ones but aren't quite ready. All right, moving on. Katie Camillo has a new book out, Rainy Nightingale. And this book is interesting. I have to admit, Katie Camillo is not my favorite author of all times, but this book looks interesting. It's a little bit different. It's about a girl whose name is Raimi Clark, obviously, and she has a plan. Her father just left his family, and she's trying to get him back. And so she decides that if she enters this contest, it's Little Miss Central Florida, that maybe her name will be in the paper and that maybe he'll come back to her. And so she tries to learn how to twirl the baton, and she goes to these classes, and she meets these other girls. And these other girls also have these stories of loss. And so all of them bond about these kind of the people in their lives who have abandoned them. So it looks like a sweet book, but I think there's a little more depth to it. It got stunning reviews, and it's recommended for the young, Canfield Fisher level, but I do think it could have a wide appeal. And since it's Katie Camillo, you're going to have to buy it anyway. All right, another author that you know very well, Avi. This is a story collection. Now, when I was a librarian, I tended to stay away from these because a lot of times teachers didn't allow the kids to read them for pleasure reading for their class assignments, and they just weren't that popular. However, if your kids like short stories or story collection, this one could be good. And it's stories about fathers and sons and grandfathers, and each one is a little different. It's not a big book, so I think each story is pretty short. I was going to show you the table of contents. And so there's, different stories in here, and each one is about a different father-son duo. So if this is something could fit into your collection, it could be a good addition. Next, another author you know well, Sarah Pennypacker. This book looks fabulous, and I have to say it's on my nightstand right now. This one has that kind of impossible journey. I can't remember the name of the book. You'll know in a minute. So it's got this kind of animal journey story to it, and it's about a boy named Peter who has a pet fox named Pax, and they don't say exactly when it takes place, but it's during a war. I'm gonna guess World War I, maybe. not sure. The father enlists in the military, and they have to go stay with his grandfather, and they can't take the fox. And so Peter is heartbroken. And so he goes to live with his grandfather, and he misses Pax so much that he goes on an adventure to try to find Pax. And Pax, in the same time, is missing his boy and tries to go find him and has all these crazy adventures. So there's these kind of parallel adventures until I hope they find each other. I don't know. I'll tell you after I finish it. It looks like a great adventure story. It's got, 2 different points of view. And it's about a fox. It's so cute, right? All right. You need to have it. She wrote Clementine, right? All right. Next. A series that you are going to want in your library. Secrets of Dragon Tomb is a young steampunk story. And I haven't seen a lot of really young steampunk stories, and I think it's important. So this is, it takes place in 19th century British Mars, and it's about a 12-year-old. And so he lives on Mars. But he wants his life to be a little bit more like the stories that he read when he was on Earth. The crazy sci-fi stories, but his life isn't. And so he has this crazy family, and he starts hearing about these things that are happening. And he decides to solve these mysteries. There's a dragon tomb, and there's ancient Martian technology, and there's all these crazy hunting machines everywhere. So it's kind of this crazy mix of outer space and technology and robots and things like that. It looks like a really fast-paced, good story for your, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. And it's a series. And they're going to be coming out fast and furious. So this looks like it could be a really good one if you have adventure lovers in your library. All right, next. This book reminded me a lot of Kirby Larson's book. I think it was Dash. It's about a girl who lives, I think she lives in California. Yeah, in California. During World War II, but she's Japanese American, and so her family gets moved to a camp, and she has to leave her dog behind. And her dog has to stay with a neighbor, and she misses him desperately. And so she sends these messages to him, her wishes into the air, hoping that he'll come find her. So it's not a new concept, definitely not, but it could be a good story. It's short, and it looks very sweet, maybe a little bit more sweet than Dash was. I loved Dash, don't get me wrong, but it was a little more adventure-y. If you have kids who like this time period, this could be a good addition to your collection. All right, next, A Bandits Tale, Deborah Hopkinson, another known quantity. This is a story about a boy who lives in New York City in 1887. So he ended up in New York City because he was sold to a patron who made them sing and dance. These kids sing and dance for money. And he leaves them because he finds this kind of band of pickpockets. They're all kids, and they live on the street, and they steal from people. And so he joins them to survive. But then he starts to feel really bad about stealing money from people. And he meets this crazy girl named Medlin Mary, and she's Irish, and she wants to help the horses of New York City. And so they try to help the horses while living on the streets. So it's kind of he's trying to redeem himself, and he doesn't really know if he's the villain or the good guy. And he wants to be a good guy, but he's having a hard time with it. And life on the streets in New York City in the 1800s was not that fun. But I do think the kids will really like the adventure aspect of this. I was compared to, I think, Homer P. Fig, which is another great book for kids. So, could be good. Good try. All right, now this one is kind of an interesting adventure story, fantasy adventure. This is called The Last Monster, as you can see from the cover. The monsters actually remind me of Monsters, Inc. Okay, so it's a girl named Sophia, and she just went through cancer treatment, and she lost a leg, and I think she doesn't have any hair, and she's gone back to middle school, and nobody really sees her, and if they do see her, they're just being fake nice to her, and she really hates it. But one day, this book lands in her lap, and it's a portal. And this portal, it's for the Greek philosopher Zeno, one of Aristotle's lost students. And this portal tells her that she's been chosen to be the guardian of all the monsters, which is very kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer-esque, which I love. So not only does she have to survive middle school, but she also has to take care of all these monsters. They're not all good either. And she has to figure out how to take care of them, keep them safe. And she has to figure out who the heck she is, because middle school is rough. So obviously this story, one big allegory, but it looks like a good kind of fantasy story. Looks very fast paced. Could be fun for your fantasy lovers. Next, True and Nell. This book, I didn't know what to make when I was looking at the cover, but then I read about it and I'm intrigued. This is the story of based on the true life friendship of Truman Capote and Harper Lee, whose real name was Nell. And so they were childhood friends, which I had no idea. And so this is a fictionalized account of their friendship, and they had lots of adventures together. It was, I think in the 30s. So someone breaks into the drugstore, and they want to figure out who did it, and, they're solving crimes and being friends. So this is based on a true story. I like the idea of putting these two characters together. I don't know a lot about them. I don't personally, other than their books. But I think this could be fun even for the kids who don't know who they are. Although most kids probably know who Harper Lee is. Alright, next. All Rise. The Honorable Perry T. Cook. Leslie Connor, another author that you probably are aware of. So this is an interesting story. I have to say, I have not been the hugest Leslie Connor fan. Not all of her books really speak to me, but this one I'm really interested in reading. So this is a story about Perry T. Cook, who was born and raised at the Blue River Co-ed Correctional Facility in Nebraska. So his mother has been incarcerated, and the prison allows him to stay on the grounds, and he's being raised basically by the prison family. And so he sees his mother every day, they feed him, they take care of him, whatever. And, but then as his mom comes up for parole, the court finds out that he's been living in this prison and decides that he can't live there anymore. And so they pull him out and they put him in foster care. And so he's living in this place that is just totally foreign. He's never lived outside the prison. He doesn't understand how it works. He doesn't really feel like he belongs. And he's really, really struggling for, where does he go? So this could be a really interesting story. I mean, I have never seen a story quite like this. He wants to be with his mom. And obviously his mom has done something terrible to land herself in prison. And there's a little bit of court, obviously, proceedings and, what happens and how the court tries to keep him safe and what's fair. So I think it looks like an interesting premise. I can't wait to read it. All right, next one. I hate this title. I'm going to tell you right now. It Ain't So Awful Falafel. Ugh. Gross. I hate this title, and I hate the cover too. But I think the story looks fabulous. It got rave reviews. It's about this girl who has this very long name that I can't pronounce. Her family is from Iran, and she goes by Cindy from the Brady Bunch because she wants to fit in. This is the 1970s, and she lives in California, and she's just trying to fit in. That's all it is. And, her family's from Iran, and at the time, this was before the Iran hostage crisis. They get people think they're Mexican, so no one really bothers them, whatever. But then the Iran hostage crisis happens, and then all of a sudden, people start talking about Iran and start questioning where her family's from, and she is suddenly having some trouble fitting in. This book is supposed to be really funny, which I'll be interested to see. It got really good reviews, so we'll see. It's supposed to be really, really funny. You know, it's middle grade. It's 1970s, which I think is a hard time period to sell to kids because they're not really familiar with it. But the Iran hostage crisis is huge, especially for a family from the Middle East. So this could be just a really good book for kids who are looking for humor or who are looking for bullying kind of stories. I hate the title. I really do. All right, next. Moving on to some older stuff. This book, My Life with the Liars, I love this cover. This is one of those kind of cult books which come around every once in a while. It's a little younger than most of these culty religion books, but I think this is interesting. It's about a girl, and I haven't read it yet, so I don't know exactly what kind of cult they are, but they live in a bunker in Arizona. And they don't like outsiders. And, you know, this girl has only, her name is Xylin, and she's only been inside, and they preach about the light, and they say that outside the bunker walls is all darkness and liars, and inside is where things are good. And so when she turns 13, they become these kind of proselytizers, and they go out to try to recruit more people into the light. And when she's out there, she's kidnapped by somebody who claims to be her father. And basically, she lives with him, and she discovers that life outside the bunker isn't that bad. And so now she's kind of torn between wanting to go back to the only life she's ever known to, you know, why did they tell her that the outside was so horrible? So there are a lot of stories like this out there, and you've probably read a few of them. But this one looks interesting. It could be good for your kids who are interested in these kinds of, you know, kids in turmoil stories. Another one, a little bit of brain candy for you. If you read the Selection series, which I read all of them, and I don't read entire series very often, this is total brain candy. So this is her new series called The Siren, and it's basically about this girl. Her name is Kaylin maybe, and so she was rescued from drowning, and the ocean is demanding that she repay her debt of being saved, and her debt is basically as a siren, and sirens lure people to be killed by the ocean. And she does not like it, and she can't speak, but she has to, you know, serve her sentence, and, you know, move on so that she become human again. But then she meets, of course, a human and falls in love, and they can't speak to each other, but they fall in love anyway. And it sounds terribly cheesy, but your kids are going to love it. So you just got to buy it. And I, of course, will read it, and I'll let you know how it is. All right. We've only got a couple more. Getting into the older stuff. The Girl from Everywhere. This story, this story looks really interesting. It's about a girl named Nyx. And her father, she and her father are time-traveling pirates, right? They go all over the world, all over time. But she finds out that her father is really most interested in getting back to Hawaii, Honolulu in 1868, which is when Nyx was born. And the reason he wants to get back there is because that's when he lost his love. And his wife died in childbirth. And so he wants to go back there to save her. The problem is that if he saves her, he could kill Nyx. Like, she might just be erased from history. And so she obviously has mixed feelings about that. And so there's this kind of internal struggle, and they're having these adventures. They're not even sure if they can get to Honolulu in 1868. It looks fascinating, fast and furious. It looks like good stuff. I think it could be good. And I am not a big fan of time travel, so I think it looks awesome. All right, next, Great Falls. This story looks interesting. It's about PTSD. It's about a boy named Shane who's always loved his big brother Jeremy, but Jeremy just came back from a tour in the Middle East and is suffering from PTSD pretty bad. He's falling into drinking, he's antisocial, he's moody, and So I think Shane is a football player, I think, and gets a concussion. And Jeremy says, hey, let's go to the cabin and get out of here. And he says, absolutely, just was humiliated, let's go. But as they're there, he starts to get really worried about his brother. You know, he carries a gun all the time, he's drinking, and then he realizes his brother doesn't want to go back to reality. And so it's this real struggle. And there's like this kind of adventure over the rivers there on the Shenandoah and the Potomac, and lots of the brothers AWOL, and all this kind of crazy stuff is happening. So it looks like a great adventure story, but it also has this underlying kind of dealing with deep stuff. You know, PTSD is no small matter, and the war, you know, this is becoming more and more real for a lot of people. So I think this could be a good discussion book. 4 more. All right, next one. If I Was Your Girl. This book looks fabulous. It got really good reviews. It's about this girl named Amanda who lives in Tennessee, and she's the new girl in school, and she just transferred there, and she doesn't want to get too close to anybody. She's not sure. She's new, and she's just not sure she wants to be friends with anybody. But then she meets this boy, and she becomes really close to him, and I'm sure there's some sort of romance. And she wants to be close to him, and she wants to tell him all her secrets. The problem is that her biggest secret is that her name was not Amanda in her last school. Her name was Andrew. So this is a pretty big secret, and she's not sure she wants to share. So transgender issues are very, very hot right now, and it's an important thing to discuss. And I think this could be an interesting story, because it's from a point of view of someone who's just trying to fit in. And it doesn't seem to be like a bullying book or an issue book. It's just about a kid who's just trying to make it work. And I think that's important. So this could be a really good addition to your collection. All right. A Study in Charlotte. This cover is kind of wacky. So this is the story of... the children of Sherlock Holmes and Watson. So this is takes place in a boarding school, and you have Charlotte Holmes and you have Jamie Watson, and they are the grandchildren, great-great-great-granddaughter of the famous detective and his assistant. And they do not want to know each other, but they ended up in the same boarding school, so they end up locked together. And then they are accused of horrible things. They're being framed for murder, and there's all this crazy stuff going on. And so they have to help each other and solve this mystery. It looks a little on the cheesy side, but if you have kids who like Sherlock Holmes, you know, Sherlock Holmes is very popular right now, especially in the media. And I think if you like that, it could be fun, you know, a little play on what would it be like to be his great-great-great-granddaughter. All right, getting more dark into the high school stuff. This one's called Blue Screen. Dan Wells wrote Partials, which I really, really liked. And this book looks like a really interesting dystopia book. Dark. And it's an allegory about a lot of drugs and media use. So it's heavy. So this takes place in Los Angeles in 2050. And basically everybody has this smart device implanted into their head so that they can be connected to the internet 24/7. So you have unfettered access to email, games, virtual reality, everything, all the time. And most teens are plugged in all the time. And they call them their genies. And so everybody has this, and if you have this, you basically have access to this underground world. But then this is about this girl named Marissa, who, you know, she plays all these virtual reality games, and she has all these awesome friends. But then they get their hands on this something called Blue Screen, which is a virtual drug, which is supposed to give them some sort of safe neurochemical high. But obviously it doesn't. It's not as safe as it seems. And it sounds like it's one of those pulse-pounding, crazy stories where there's a lot of chase scenes and craziness. I think it could be really good for your dystopia fans. And it looks like a really good adventure story as well. And the last one. Are you ready? All right. The Darkest Corners. This story is about a girl named Tessa, and she grew up in Fayette, Pennsylvania, but she left when she was young. She was 9. There was a big trial, and she and her best friend, Callie, testified against this guy and got him put in jail for life. And as soon as the trial was over, she left and never came back, and they never talked about it. And so now Tessa is back because her father, something's happening with her father, so she comes back, and she, of course, sees Callie and Tessa have to see each other again. And they start asking questions and really kind of rehashing what happened that last summer. And then somebody else dies, and they start to question whether or not they put the right person away, and whether the story was right, and whether they really were on the side of justice. This looks like one of those ripped from the headlines, like Special Victims Unit kind of stories. Kids who like to watch SVU, CSI, all those kind of forensic shows. This could be a really good book for them. Hardcore mystery with a kind of, who's on the side of justice kind of question, which, is something that teens they start to grapple with and they get older. All right, that's enough. It's only been an hour. So thank you for listening. This is my contact information. Please get in touch if you need anything. If you have ideas about what I should be reading, if you have questions, you have comments, if you are a publisher and want to send me books, I'm happy to take them. And if you go to the information, the description on this video, there will be a list of everything that I reviewed today. Please visit our YouTube channel and see all of my videos. I do one video a month with all of the new books that I get here in my office. So happy May, everyone, and I hope that this weather clears up soon and we can enjoy some warm weather.